All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. So, a shoulder injury has ended the NFL career of New Orleans Saints quarterback Derek Carr, as he called it a career today. Now, in 11 NFL seasons, nine with the Oakland/Las Vegas Raiders, and then two more with the Saints. Carr passed for more than 41,000 yards while he threw 257 touchdowns. But what's going to hang over Carr's career is his record as a starting quarterback. And like I always say, fairly or not, it's one of the first things that quarterbacks are judged by. Okay, and his record as a starting quarterback in the NFL was 77 and 92. However, okay, for me, I say this because for me, I look at it and say, hey, we really don't know, in my opinion, how good that Derek Carr could have been in the National Football League, just due to the fact that he really played on some bad or for some bad organizations. All right. Don't get me wrong. I am not here to say that Derek Carr could have been John Elway, but I just feel that the potential was not fully reached. I mean, he played on some bad Raiders teams, okay? And when things finally got right for the Silver and Black back in 2016, he was injured late in that season. If you remember, Derek Carr finished third in the MVP voting that year. And as a starter, with Carr as a starting quarterback, the Raiders were 12-3. He threw 28 touchdowns and six interceptions. And of course, Raiders got to the playoffs. They had to go with Matt McGloin as their starting quarterback, and they lost to the Houston Texans. And then, he was unavailable for the Raiders. Or pardon me, he did play one postseason game for the Raiders when they got there in 2001, and that 2021 rather, and that was a tough season for the Silver and Black. John Gruden was fired midseason, replaced by Rich Bisaccia. The Raiders rallied and got to the wild card game before they lost to the eventual AFC champion Cincinnati Bengals. But getting back to 2016, it looked like things were coming together for the Raiders finally. Okay, and things unravel so quickly. The year after that, we saw Jack Del Rio be let go as the Raiders head coach. The next thing you know, Khalil Mack was traded to the Chicago Bears. Before you blinked, Amari Cooper was gone, and things just unraveled, unfortunately, so quickly for the Raiders. Then after that, once Jack Del Rio was let go as head coach of the Raiders, it was the John Gruden show for the Silver and Black. And I'm not here to knock John Gruden because I think John Gruden was a solid NFL head coach in my opinion, but he never fully embraced Derek Carr as a starting quarterback. Okay, he worked with him, yes, but it's a difference when a head coach comes in and gets a guy who's his guy. And Derek Carr simply was never John Gruden's guy. Okay, and then after that, like I said, um, Gruden was let go in 2021. The team rallied around Rich Bisaccia, but then Mark Davis made the decision not to retain Rich Bisaccia, and then he went with Josh McDaniels. And I said this before: when you bring in Josh McDaniels, you know what you're getting because we saw it when he was with Denver, and he immediately went out of his way to get rid of Derek Carr. And of course, 2022 was a disaster season for Derek Carr. It was a disaster season for the Raiders. And then they sat him down prior to the end of the season. They didn't want to get him to get injured because they were worried about, his salary for the next year kicking in. They ended up cutting him anyway, and that's how he ended up with the Saints. And of course, that salary still accounted for, to the Raiders' payroll. But nonetheless, it's one of those where his career with the Raiders did not end well, and usually it doesn't end well for most players with teams. But he was a guy who bled silver and black. He embodied them. He was a good spokesperson for the organization during the transition from Oakland to Las Vegas. And at the end of the day, uh, he got a boot in the rear end on the way out the door. Okay, that's the nicest way to say it. And at the end of the day, he went to New Orleans. He was serviceable there, but he wasn't that good. I mean, it was one of those in 2 years with the Saints. He did throw 40 touchdowns and two interceptions. They were 9-8 in 2023. They lost out as far as getting the last postseason spot. Or winning division, should I say, the NFC South, that is. Of course, that went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was 5-5 last year before the injuries really took a toll on him. But when it's all said and done, I look at Carr like this. I'm going to look at him first and foremost in comparison to the quarterbacks who were taken ahead of him back in 2014, because Carr was a second round pick. And I said it then, and I will say it now. I, for the life of me, don't understand why Derek Carr lasted until the second round. I think some of it had to do with him playing at Fresno State. And I also think some of it had to do with the stigma that was unfairly attached to him due to his brother, not working out with the Houston Texans. And I'm talking about David Carr. That's a whole nother story for another day. I got a lot to talk about on that too. But nonetheless, getting back to Derek, if you looked at Derek Carr, especially in his senior year at Fresno State, he was out of all of the quarterbacks that were taken ahead of him. I felt like he was the most pro-ready quarterback, in my opinion. Blake Bortles went third overall that year to Jacksonville. We saw Johnny Manziel go 22nd overall to the Cleveland Browns, and then of course Teddy Bridgewater went near the end of the first round to the Minnesota Vikings. And no fault of Carr's, but he had a longer and more successful career than all of those quarterbacks that I just mentioned. All right. So it's one of those where sometimes, the draft experts, if you will, really don't always get it right, in my opinion. But for me, some might agree with what I'm about to say, some might disagree. It is all good. Okay. But for me, I am going to give Derek Carr's NFL career an incomplete, because there's part of me that is going to ask, what would have happened for Derek Carr if he had played for a better organization? And I say this, you look at the Raiders, whether it's been Oakland or whether it's been Vegas, for more than 2 decades now, this has been a franchise where the hopes, dreams, and careers of players go to die. Okay. And it's so bad, it's so difficult to find success through that. And if you look at the Raiders in 2014, they had put together, it looked like they had put together, a solid foundation to try to get this thing turned around. Your first pick, I think fourth overall, you used on Khalil Mack, who was in his prime one of the premier edge rushers in the NFL. You get your franchise quarterback in Derek Carr. You follow that up in 2015. You use a first round pick on wide receiver Amari Cooper. And of course, we know about the whole ACDC connection on offense for the Raiders. But nonetheless, you had the building blocks to, I'm not going to say build something special, but start to turn things around and start to get ahead of this thing. And the Raiders, in their infinite wisdom, found a way to screw it up. So that's my thing. We really don't know, in my opinion, whether or not Derek Carr could have been good or better in the NFL. I just say this due to the fact that he played for a bad organization. But I mean, at the end of the day, in 9 years with the Raiders, nobody passed for more yards than Carr did. Nobody threw for more touchdown passes than he did. And he had a higher completion percentage than the likes of Ken Stabler and Rich Gannon, just to name a few. But when it's all said and done, it's just the way that it is. Now, on the flip side for the New Orleans Saints, where do they go from here? I mean, we saw them use a second round pick on Tyler Shaw, and you have to wonder, is he the future at quarterback for New Orleans? We have to wait and see. I mean, I think this is going to be a throwaway year for the Saints, in my opinion. You've got yourself a rookie head coach in Kellen Moore, who's trying to go out there and figure things out and find the right guys for his system. And you got to wonder because there was speculation about this as far as Carr maybe not being able to play or his 2025 season being in jeopardy because of the injury, and you had to wonder if that was going to make the Saints pivot in their draft strategy. They didn't take a quarterback in round number one, but they sure enough did in round number two. For me, some people are going to say, well, it's going to be the Arch Manning sweepstakes for the New Orleans Saints. I'm here to say I don't agree with that because it's going to be the Arch Manning show now at Texas. We know that, all right. Hence why, Quinn Ewers is in the NFL. But nonetheless, we don't know how good that Arch Manning is going to look this season for Texas. I mean, the expectations are high, do not get me wrong. And then on top of that, who's to say that Arch Manning is going to make that jump? Because A, Arch Manning comes from money. B, with the NILs exploding the way that they are on the college scene, it is really not making kids, jump to the NFL earlier than they really want to. So if you're Arch Manning, you can sit back and still collect the check. I know it's not going to be NFL money, but I feel like it's not as much of a rush. And you don't have, and you as a college player, if you're good enough, you can sit back and really dictate things a little bit more because you could say, hey, you're looking at the teams that could be drafting early at your position. I know the lineage there because his grandfather, Archie, played for the Saints for many years, but maybe he doesn't want to go there. We have to wait and see. I'm just throwing it out there. Okay. So I don't think that it's a guarantee either. Some people are going to ask, will the Saints regret, passing on Shador Sanders? I don't know. We've got to wait and see how things work out for Tyler Shaw with the Saints. We've got to wait and see how things work out for Shador Sanders with the Cleveland Browns. The one thing we do know for sure, the future at quarterback for the New Orleans Saints will not include Derek Carr. Like I said before, I'm going to give his career an incomplete because I feel like we simply don't know how good that he could have been. He was solid, okay. He wasn't great, okay, but he was solid and serviceable for many years in the National Football League. And you got to be doing something right to reach that double digit uh, career mark, especially for a starter in the National Football League, because that means you have made multiple contracts. But nonetheless, very rarely do professional athletes get to walk away on their terms. And, sometimes injuries cut a career short. I'm sure Derek Carr probably expected or hoped to play several more years in the NFL, but it did not work out that way. But still, 11 years, you know, you shouldn't have anything to sit back and say, "Wow, you know what? Any regrets to the game, if you will." But you know what? It was the end of the line for him, and I'm sure he'll go on with his life and do great things. Let's see what's next for the Saints for their quarterback situation and how they respond to this. I kind of feel like they could read the tea leaves, if you will, with that shoulder injury. They're somewhat prepared, but let's see how the Saints look on offense this season with a new quarterback and a new head coach as they look to go forward. But, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And as always, if you like what you heard and saw, please feel free to hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Like I always say, it's greatly appreciated. Also, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. That also goes for Instagram, as you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. Give me that follow. I'll give you that follow right back. Also, if you're on Facebook, you can check us out at Sports Depot 365. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. Shameless plug there. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.